I want to talk a bit about just general music playing in general. I just find it interesting that piano playing, there's two sorts of parameters going on. There's obviously more people are playing keyboards, and quite interestingly, in a class now, whereas when we were doing music, you'd have a piano in the centre of the room. Now every child has a keyboard, and so there's a greater knowledge right across the board of notes and keys than ever before. Before, it was the privileged few that had parents who could pay for piano lessons. So that in that way, that's quite an interesting situation that's developed. But nevertheless, this period of piano goes back to a time when there was no TV, there was no radio. This was the entertainment in the evenings. This is what people relaxed to. They gathered round, they sang songs like Tipperary, hymns, they sang show tunes, music hall items, all that kind of stuff, and they just shared around the piano, and so many people played. Some people could read music, other people didn't even read music, they just played by ear. But what I want to say is I'm convinced that at least some part of what's going on with the decline in piano playing mirrors something, certainly in English society, less so perhaps in Wales, where there's still the culture of the Eisteddfod, but it seems like in England and probably in America, the only people really learning piano, well, to any number, are in the sort of schools that push musical learning, and you know, whereas they would push sport in a big way, they'd push music as well. Again, it's the privileged. Whereas before, the fact that Britain is one of the few countries in the world, if not the only country in the world, that practically had one piano in every house, and that's the heritage that we've been living from. Now there's so few that have these pianos, and certainly to go out and buy them again, you've got to remember that when these pianos were bought, this was most of a year's wage, represents most of a year's wage to buy one of these, especially the upper echelon ones. In fact, it was John Broadwood who brought in credit. John Broadwood and the grand pianos required credit. They were crazily expensive. They were incredibly expensive, proportionate to what people earned. And so they were. It was John Broadwood that brought in credit. And I just put before you. I mean, you can think about it. But how much is the decline in quality of education, that is a balanced approach to education, mirrored in the drop-off in piano practicing. Let's just think about the sort of things that happen when you learn piano. Obviously a 6-year-old, quite often 6-year-olds, or in Japan, where you're learning with the Suzuki method, which is much more oral, A-U-R-A-L. It starts even earlier, around 3. You're building up the muscle tone in your fingers, so often it's a slow start. If adults learn to play piano, they learn a lot quicker because the muscles are there. They've learned to type, they learn how to use the keyboard and stuff, and so often adults progress far quicker. So there's muscular learning, coordination learning. There's also instilling the idea of practice, regular practice and discipline, and persistence. Persistence when things don't come straight away, just keep on at it, keep on at it. The other thing is obviously there's the discipline on the left brain side of learning to read music, learning to play scales methodically, learning bits about chords, about the rudiments of music, how it works. That's pretty left brain stuff. But then of course you've got the right brain, developing the right brain use of playing atmospheres, being sensitive to atmospheres, reproducing those atmospheres, particularly when you get into impressionist music. It's all about atmosphere, and when you're playing a piece like La Cathédrale Engloutie, which is by Debussy, which I can't play, but it begins each end of the keyboard to give the idea of a sunken cathedral in a lake. Then there's the very simple piece that Debussy has is La Fille aux cheveux de lin, the flaxen-haired girl, which is just simply pentatonic, or the black keys of the piano, however that goes. We had to study that. My background is classical guitar, so I took guitar right through to grade 8. Now it's interesting, I had two experiences. I had the solo learning experience, which is great, one-on-one, fantastic privilege to have parents that would pay for that. But I did experience, as we started to go into lessons for an hour together, I experienced working alongside someone who was at my level in classical guitar. It was actually the friend who's the son of the producer of Songs of Praise. And we just had a great time because he had strengths and I had strengths, and we just had the lesson together and we bounced off each other. So those who have experienced group lessons, you're learning a bit about, a bit more about cooperation, working together, especially nowadays in guitar, they have guitar orchestras. So whereas in our day, it was very much a solo instrument, we're playing solo pieces. Now you get somewhat of a feel for playing together. And that was always a thing. When I grew up, I had to take flute as an additional instrument because my music teacher said, oh, it'd be good for you to do an instrument to get some orchestral experience. So I took that to grade 5. But nowadays, because of the prevalence of guitar orchestras, you can get that experience just playing along with others in those. A properly functioning human must be able, and does in fact, work from both sides of the brain. It's something we take for granted because it's actually, that's how we work. And a properly functioning person, if you put a PET scan on their brain, and you can see a picture of it if you Google PET scan, you can see a picture of the coloured areas of the brain lighting up equally on both sides, firing off each other. Interestingly, there is a picture of a depressed person, which I've put on my blog, firing only on one side, the left-hand side of the brain, or the kind of critical facility, which is just dwelling and spinning on problems and parameters and just going round and round, and everything looks so bleak, and it just spirals around worse and worse and worse. So that is what it is not to function correctly as a human. So the idea is, with music, it throws you into more balance because you're dealing with both sides of the brain. Now, creatively, you're not so worried about the notes at that point. So if you've got a few pigeonholes in your brain, like there are only 12 notes. So if you know that, you know that to produce a major chord, it's always the same amount of notes between the first and the third, for example. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right across for all the chords. So that produces a major chord sound, which is the bedrock really of Western music. Then the minor, which is just reducing the third by a semitone. But if you know that, you can do any key you like. So, for example, if you're in F, it's the same set of same parameters to produce that chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then minor, you're reducing the third note of the scale. Then later on you learn things like the 7th chord has a flattened, what we call a flattened 7th in it. Which then wants to go to the 4th chord in the scale, which is F. I'm in C, C7. So all rock and roll is going to the 3 chords are going to F, C, F and G. Then there's the major 7th chord, which gives you that sort of wistful sound. Now the major 7th is using the proper major, the 7th note in a major scale, which ordinarily you wouldn't use, but it does create this special incomplete kind of nostalgic sound, yearning sound. So if you know a few of these rules and they're just pigeonholed in your brain, then you can just doodle around, do what you want. Obviously, because my CD and things aren't written, my brain tends to gravitate towards certain chord sequences that are related to the songs I've written. So, for example, in the Blood Song, which is in A minor, which is a fairly standard sequence of chords descending, which you'd find that sequence in Hotel California. I was listening to one, I can't remember the name of it now, but it's in the Dire Straits song. But it's quite standard to have this descending feel. So it's just the bass going down. It starts on A, then up onto G sharp. Then I'm flattening that to go to the 7th. That's the minor 7th, okay? So that's G natural there. Then I drop again to F sharp. Just to say about diminished. Diminished is a weird chord because it's like taking a minor third right up a whole scale. So in D minor, you've got that minor third there. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you count up another 4. So you go 1, 2, 3, 4. Depends whether you include the first note, of course. Probably shouldn't do. I should probably be counting up like this. First note, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That's a 2 diminished. Actually, it wasn't a diminished I was playing, was it? It was a, what was it? No, it's got a 7th thing. It wants to go to E, which is, and I've got a 7th thing. So you see, quite quickly you can build up sort of a pigeonhole of how different things work, how the different chords work. So you're not dependent on going out and buying music all the time, which is a very expensive way, well, certainly with current music. So if you can develop the ability to hear what music is doing and then to mimic it, it's just far easier. Then that goes into the chorus. So when I'm doodling around, I often use a chord sequence from that song. Which is unusual because it's not in the normal C scale. The normal C scale is but this has the flat 6th chord, which I've made into major 7th. Do the same. I've made that into, we haven't covered that one yet, the second, a second chord, a B flat 2 chord. So the B flat chord would be like that. But then you've got the second note in it. And that produces a nice chord. So you've got flat in the 6th,